Here's one for you, Liam. The entire surface area in the world used by mining is a fraction of what is used by Walmart parking lots.
So, g'day everybody, and welcome to Spotlight Mining. I'm Liam Hardy, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Tom Obradovich, all the way from Canada. How are you doing today, Tom?
Very good this morning, Liam.
It's a very early start for you. Why are you up so early today?
Well, I have to get ready to drive up to Northern Ontario and visit the drill site and check on my crew.
Yeah. Not too bad a day on the road, though. Right? It's not too far out of where you are.
You know what? That's one of the advantages of the project itself is it's about 4.5 hours north of Toronto, but it sits in the midst of three of the bigger smelters in North America. So if we should be successful in finding sulfide concentrates, we would be in good shape and in high demand by those smelters.
Yeah, and I learned the hard way years ago when I first came to Canada. 4.5 hours is a short drive.
Yeah, it's like going through 4 countries in Europe, but here it's a short jaunt up to the northern part of the property.
I think in 5 hours you do the whole of the UK. So if you put your foot down.
Well, my wife and I drove across Canada a couple times to get to our new home in British Columbia, and it is 40 hours and 4,000 kilometers.
I've done the flight many times, Toronto to Vancouver, and most of the scenery is very repetitive.
Yes, it is, for sure.
So why don't you sort of kick us off? Tell us a bit about yourself and your history, because you might be new to some of our European listeners.
Well, I started in business some 40 years ago as a prospector, coming out of Iron Ore Company of Canada during a lull in the iron ore industry. I decided that seeing as there were no jobs, I would create my own. I started as a contract prospector for a number of companies. And then I saw people making money and developing resources that probably didn't have the experience or background I had. So I went into business on my own, eventually morphed into acquiring mining properties and selling them to companies, and then decided, well, I'd try the public company thing in the early 90s. We formed Canadian Royalties, managed to find a nickel project in South Raglan Belt, northern Quebec. We sold that to Chinese interests, and I moved on to do an acquisition in a low period in the business, Young Davidson Mines off the receiver Royal Oak. We developed that into roughly 2 million ounces and sold it to Northgate Minerals. That now is producing 225,000 ounces a year near my hometown of Kirkland Lake. That was quite a success for us. We then springboarded down to Ecuador. I was involved in creating Dalradian Resources, which found the Fruta del Norte deposit. That was a tremendous discovery for us, a blind discovery. That's what twigged me on to Temagami, and looking at an area that was covered with about 300 meters of cover rock. Fruta del Norte was also a buried deposit that we used clues to identify the target below surface, and that's exactly what we're doing on our new project as explorers of looking at things that are buried, as opposed to, I think all the easy deposits have been discovered, the surface deposits in most of the areas where mining is prevalent. The easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit is there. Now it's more difficult, but we feel that there's low-hanging fruit for the technically astute companies that are looking for massive sulfide deposits and Olympic Dam style mineralization in different areas. But we're really anticipating this drill program. So yeah, that's pretty much my history.
The short version.
The short version.
Yeah, and I suppose the deal that you were involved in that most European listeners will relate to was with Dalradian, just over the sea from my country. What was your involvement there with that deal?
I was brought in by Patrick Anderson, had put the company together, and Gren Thomas assisted in it. He is a great friend of mine, and I was brought in to be a lead director and help negotiate some of the deals. And with our experience with Aurelian, Jonathan Rubinstein was also appointed to the board, and eventually it morphed into one of the largest undeveloped gold resources in Europe. I stayed with the company some 8 or 9 years and enjoyed my time traveling to Northern Ireland and doing some work in London to get the company listed on the London Stock Exchange. Eventually, Jonathan and I formed the committee. When we decided that it would be best for the shareholders, we formed the committee to sell the company to Orion Mine Development out of New York, and I played a role in that committee to sell the property on behalf of the shareholders.
Yeah, and it's quite a famous deal for the UK. It's there's not many of those go through and are successful, so that one sticks in mind. Yeah.
You know, the unfortunate thing with that deposit is that it still isn't permitted, and it should have been, you know, a few years ago. That portion of Northern Ireland is, you know, dire need of those jobs, and I just don't think that the experience that those people had. I grew up in a mining town in Northern Ontario, and mining was a lifeblood of our economy. And I don't think some of the anti-mining people in Northern Ireland are aware of the financial and economic benefits that would be experienced by the entire country if that were to move forward. You know, for every one mining job, there's approximately 3 spin-off jobs. It's not just the economic boost that you get from the mine itself, it's the spin-offs, and it develops new industries, and you know, it would be tremendously economic beneficial to Northern Ireland if they should pass any legislation to allow that project go forward.
Yeah, there's a great example of that. There's a town called Stewart in British Columbia, where you see countless mineral exploration companies based out of there, hitting the Southern Golden Triangle. And almost everybody in that town is involved in that business. They're either making coffee for the exploration guys, or running the hotels that they stay in, flying the helicopters for them. But almost everyone in that town has a history in or works in mining. I think
it's interesting that, you know, once you you tap the mining industry and realize that the mining industry isn't here to destroy the environment or cause any kind of major disruption in the environment. We're actually probably one of the most environmentally sound industries on the planet because we have to be and we want to be. And, you know, when you develop a mine, your employees live in that environment. So that environment has to be pristine in order for them to survive and thrive and want to live there. So the onus is up to the mining company to make sure that they're environmentally sound. They do everything to replace any damage to the environment. They've done in a lot of cases. You know, a mining company will go into an area and actually leave it in better shape than they found it. There was a case years ago in the Montalban mine west of Timmins, where the natural water they brought into the treatment facility was naturally contaminated with arsenic from the rocks around the lake, and the mill was actually emitting water that was cleaner than they were bringing in.
Yeah, and we spoke a lot about this last week on the podcast with Jamie Strauss about how, if you look at the impacts of mining worldwide compared to farming, the actual surface impact of mining is a few square kilometers per mine. For necessary resources we need for development, just like we need food for development. But nobody seems to complain about the use of chemical fertilizers and all of these things destroying soil on a huge scale, whereas mining only impacts a few kilometers.
Here's one for you, Liam. The entire surface area in the world used by mining is a fraction of what is used by Walmart parking lots.
I can agree with that. That's got to be true. Yeah. What's underneath the parking lots, though? Let's go and mine those afterwards. Good stuff. So let's have a chat about Conquest. This company's been around for quite a long time, and you've just kicked off a 10,000 meter drilling program. There was a news release this week. What are you targeting with that program, and what brought you to these properties?
Well, we're really following in the footsteps of Dr. Norman Keevil, that was the founder of Teck Corporation, and he discovered his first mine on Temagami Island. It was a high-grade copper, platinum, palladium deposit with a little bit of nickel. It's quite a unique deposit, and it always baffled me as to exactly what it was. And it wasn't until with the private company and the predecessor to Conquest, before we amalgamated it in October of last year with Conquest Resources, that had the mining rights to an area that was on strike with Dr. Keevil's first discovery. And I'd been fascinated with Dr. Keevil's mine. It was known as Copperfields. It shouldn't be there. You know, if it was a VMS, it shouldn't have PGEs in it. And it did. It had substantial. The discovery hole was over an ounce palladium and 28% copper over 48 feet, which is direct shipping ore to the Noranda smelter. Now, that was a bit of an oddity in that why was that deposit that looks like a lens that you might find in the Sudbury camp, why was it there? And then, in further research over the years, we realized that it may be related to the Sudbury impact crater through the development of the Temagami geophysical anomaly, which is almost like a mirror image of the Sudbury impact crater. If you see them side by side, they look like sisters. But nobody ever really, and it bothered Dr. Keevil. I spoke to him on a few occasions as to what was the origin of that enormous positive magnetic feature that's one of the largest magnetic features in the world. What's the origin of it, and why is it there, and what impact might it have on the geology in the area? And in 2014, in a fit of private company insanity and probably a few brews, I was having a drink with or two or maybe a half a dozen with a driller that I knew, and he had just put together an enormous rig and he was dying to try it. And we decided, well, let's drill the Temagami anomaly. So I made a deal with Teck Corporation to option the center of it, which was one of the first properties Teck ever had. It was called Dominion Gulf Consolidated Mines, that was swallowed up with the Teck group. So we drilled a vertical hole about 2.2 kilometers straight down and right through the heart of the Temagami magnetic anomaly. Dr. Keevil tried the same thing, but they were only able to get down about 1,200 feet in 1948, I believe. And then the drilling technology wasn't to the point where they could get down far enough to test it. They didn't even penetrate the cover rock, which was about 800 meters to get through into the Archean underlayer. Anyway, we discovered an area that eventually it morphed into a PhD study by the University of Würzburg in Germany. A young PhD student and his prof got very interested in what we're doing. And they took about 3 or 4 years to do age dating on the rocks that we found. We actually found a Sudbury outlier, a Sudbury offset dike at 1,989 meters down the hole. We found the host rock of most of the Sudbury ores. And that was fascinating to us. Once they finished a PhD study in 2018, 2019, we had a reason to believe that, and with the professor's good work, that this may have been an event that caused major cracks in the Earth's crust which would allow metal to come up, much like a funnel effect. And but it was still buried between a veneer of about 200 or 300 meters of younger rocks, being Huronian sediments and Nipissing diabase hills. So how do you attack that when you can't see anything on surface? Well, we have Kevin Stevens on board, that was the chief geophysicist for Falconbridge for years and responsible for a number of discoveries in the Sudbury camp. We enlisted Kevin, who aided us in the first attempt at drilling in and around the Temagami magnetic anomaly. And we decided we were going to do the acquisition of Golden Rose through an amalgamation with Conquest Resources. John Kearney, who ran Conquest, was actually an old, I wouldn't say adversary, but a colleague, in that I was entrusted by Dalradian to purchase a 2% NSR that one of John's companies had on the Kurnal deposit in Northern Ireland. So after much haggling and going back and forth, we eventually bought that royalty for $20-some million worth of Dalradian stock. And John and I developed a relationship. Years later, you fast forward, and John owns this little company called Conquest Resources that was asleep and sitting there and needed some rejuvenation. So he was welcoming me in to actually amalgamate my private company with the public company. And my long-suffering shareholders of Canadian Continental got a liquidity event. We put the two companies together and come out with about 90 million shares and roughly 40-60 in John's favor for the public company. And away we went. We started in November, doing some work on the Golden Rose to see if we could find any gold and iron formation. Drilled a few holes, came up with a little bit of gold, but the real prize in our eyes and in Kevin's eyes was the property that Conquest had hosted the southern end and the western extension of the belt of rhyolitic units that hosted the Copperfields mine for Teck. And they had done some airborne geophysics on a small portion of ground and come up with some spectacular results, some really defined VMS and magmatic nickel copper type targets. So we took it the next step, and Kevin had identified an area just to the north. So we took upon a large ground acquisition program, put together some 260,000 hectares of land that had never been done before, and flew the entire belt with V10 Max system that had depth penetration, far greater than anything else that was around during the time of Dr. Keevil. And he wished he had the toys back then that we have today. But we were able to fly a detailed airborne electromagnetic survey to look at conductors beneath the veneer of cover rocks, and came up with some 30 targets after screening and processing the data. 30 targets that are conductors in the land area that we surveyed. In addition to, we meshed it with the old survey that had been done by Conquest in the past. And in addition to that, we're following up on a ground gravity survey to the north that was coincident with, a rare earth element geochemical anomaly and known copper occurrences and hematite and gold in that area in the younger rocks that were coming up through quartz veins from the older rocks below, and developed some quite spiffy IOCG targets at the same time. So that's how we came to be.
Yeah. Again, a longer story this time, but it's really good to hear about a project that has some actual ethos and history. Normally, if you ask somebody, how did you get this ground? They say, oh, we were told it was good. There's something good next door, and that's the whole story. This one sounds like you've been working on it for a long time before you've really got to hit it and pick it up to where it is now.
This
So
is
there's a lot of data, a lot of analysis has gone into this.
this is an odyssey that lasted some. It began with telling speaking with Dr. Keeble in the mid '80s and having it in the back of our mind and starting to develop and get interested in the camp in the early '90s. And it's come to fruition where we're finally drilling. We developed those targets some 30 years later, and here we are, at a point where we're going to unveil the mystery of what lies underneath the cover rocks in the Temagami camp. There's another company actually, Inventus, that is looking at the younger rocks for Sudbury style mineralization in the younger rocks. And we're not discounting anything that we may find that's been overlooked in the geology that lies on top of the cover rocks, or that may have come through it at a later date. But primarily, we're focused on the targets that we generated by our airborne geophysics and ground gravity surveys.
So the beauty of exploration is things are very rarely where you think they're going to be.
Exactly. And I'll take what I can get. I'd rather be lucky than good.
You get all the right signs for a VMS, and then an IOCG pops up in the corner, like you were saying.
Well, diamond fields, there's a classic example, looking for diamonds in Labrador, and they come up with one of the larger nickel discoveries in modern time.
Associated rocks, yeah.
Yes.
So right now, Conquest, you're cashed up at the moment. What's the situation share-wise and cash-wise?
Well, share-wise, we have issued and outstanding some 132 million shares, and that's largely a result from the amalgamation between the two companies and a financing that we did right out of the chute. I had $1 million roughly in the till. Conquest was in dire straits at the time. It had very little money kicking around, and then we did a financing. The first financing at 12 cents. For hard dollar financing, and in North America, in Canada, we use a flow-through tax benefit mechanism of financing, which we also took advantage of in the initial run. But we raised approximately $4 million in the first round. Tony McCooch from Kirkland Lake Gold was always a little fascinated with the Temagami camp and the lack of work done on it, so he decided he'd like to come in and put some early money in, which was greatly appreciated. He bought about 9% of the company, put about $1.3 million into the young entity that we created. And around Christmas, I realized that we needed some more money, so we did another $850,000 in flow-through cash to kind of get the ball rolling. The airborne survey, unfortunately, we did it at the worst time of the year, and it was quite expensive because we had some standby fees that were a little excessive. But all in all, it was about $600,000 in airborne geophysics and ground gravity to take us to this point. It's quite an achievement for a little junior starting out. Not very many companies are totally focused. As you know, Liam, you've interviewed a number of people that are rehashing old properties of known mineralization. That's easy. Anybody can do that. Not very many companies go in and drill blind targets on a massive scale as we're doing. Now, the chances of success are reduced greatly, and we have a high-risk company. It's not. This is not for the faint of heart. An investment in Conquest requires a little bit of a gamble and a little bit of I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is high-risk exploration that we're doing here. It's drilling blindly with very little geology to have at your advantage. But the only two windows of greenstone in the belt that we're working on each host a small mine. So that leads me to believe that there has to be more mineralization in the camp, and we're going to find it.
Yeah. I think our subscribers will know that I picked up just a few shares back in April. So I thought I'd join the adventure. I like a blind story as well, and it's where you get the most potential for something good, right? You're never going to get Barrick going up with a major discovery.
Well, what you have is the opportunity for, even I would consider ours much more risky than somebody drilling known mineralization, but the reward's bigger. Imagine if we hit an Olympic dam up in the north later in the summer.
And then in a few years' time, people will say 600,000 on Aramag was cheap, right?
Yeah. And
it's going to be the hope.
If we can manage to find 4,283 million tons of material, that's economic. That's a new game. It's something.
Today's prices to offset the Aramag.
Yeah, exactly. And we're dreamers, and I've always been a bit of a gambler. So, getting back to the Dalradian days, drilling through all of that cover rock paid off, and it was risky as well at the time. Young Davidson, the best part of the ore body that we found, was buried down a half a kilometer, 500 meters down below surface for the boundary zone, and that's grown exponentially since the original discovery or development of the deposit back in 2003, 2004. So, the potential's there. It's a very drill intensive project. We've moved in, we had trouble earlier in the spring with our drilling campaign because there are lots of drills around Northern Ontario and Northwestern Quebec, but there are very few good drillers. You can have the machine, but if you don't have the operator, it's not going to be a very successful drill program. That's what we're finding throughout Northern Ontario and in the hotspots, even British Columbia. You can get the drills, but it's the person that operates it that makes a difference.
Yeah, I think we're finding that with labs being backed up. They're desperate for staff. They can't find geochemists to run the equipment. We're finding it with drillers, with geophysicists. I've had an advert open for nearly 2 months with only one application from somebody who had no relative experience. There's just such a demand for people with the current mining boom that we seem to be in, and not enough people have been trained to prepare for that. So.
Well, one of the things the labs always do when there's a downturn, there was a horrible downturn in the industry from roughly 2010s right through to this most recent adventure into mining exploration, where you get a lot of new faces on the block, and the labs always leave themselves short. They and as do the drilling companies. They reduce staff. The drilling companies don't carry on with training programs to train young people to operate these machines, and they leave themselves short. And then the boom comes, and there's not enough trained people to operate machines and develop, good, reasonable time constraints in the labs.
And then the boom ends, and there's too many people trained with not enough jobs.
Well, this time they did it to a point where they're choking us, so that in order to get your assays early, they're doubling the cost. So they're making the money anyway.
Somebody's got to.
Exactly.
So someone in the chain has to make some money. Cool. So, Tom, I think that's probably a really good place to leave this. Do you want to summarize Conquest in, say, 20 seconds?
Okay. Well, we're drilling as we speak. We've got an excellent crew that we brought all the way from Saskatchewan, which is probably for you like bringing them in from the far end of Germany. But they're an experienced crew, the Graham brothers. They're owner-operators. They've drilled, they're drilling 60 meters a shift. We're getting excellent core recovery with them. We have Jorg Kleinbeck, that's an experienced geologist running the program. We've got our camp built. We're all set to go. And we're very excited. We'll be systematically hitting these targets one by one as we go through the summer. It's going to be about a 4-month adventure. If you want the chance to have a little excitement this summer, I think Conquest is not a bad place to be.
And at the very least, follow Conquest and Spotlight Mining on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And there's some great photos there at the moment of the new camp that's just been put up and the drill rig. So at the very least, you can get a little glimpse into what's going on site.
Thank you very much, Liam. And I'm going to try and make you some money.
Be great for everybody. Eh? Thanks for your time, Tom, and have a safe drive up to camp.
Take care.
Cheers.